So, I made some videos previously about the Riyadh Comedy Festival that I've also seen this week. There's been several responses from other comedians regarding this festival, and that includes Mark Maron, David Cross, and so many other TikToks and comedian responses, even non-comedian responses on this particular festival. I know there's a lot of people who don't think this is a bad thing, but if we think about the trajectory of comedy, especially for those who were raised through Comedy Central and the birthing of the internet in and of itself, for those who even watched like YouTube when it first started, or like anything regarding social media, this is kind of a letdown of our comedy heroes, because we're watching people that have specials out there, who have shows out there, who have written material, scripts. I mean, I'm gonna go back to, I have 4 videos, or this will be my 4th video on this. Louis C.K., for example, he had a show called Louis. He has 2 episodes when he goes on a USO tour. I think about all of the things that comedians do to learn how to do comedy. You know, all of the hard hours we put in, all of our thought process, all of the integration of the voice that we work on so hard, and how these comedians were pivotal in that birthing process for a lot of us, especially in the birthing of the podcast world. Most of these comedians we listen to for hours and hours and hours to understand comedy, and generally understand the hours and hours of content that most of the comedians in this festival have out there. So it's in a lot of ways like our mentors without ever meeting them, especially people like Dave Chappelle, who has hours and hours of specials and is very much known to go into any given comedy venue and just kind of talk off the cuff. And it really makes me think, and I mean, he's been doing comedy since he was a teenager, so it's just interesting to me that it's like all of our heroes are dead in many ways, and that's why people are upset about this. It's not just about the check, it's about the hours and hours of sound that is thematically ingrained into most comics. Because, for example, Bill Burr has a lot of, physical work that he does on stage. He taught so many comics how to do that. He taught, like, his helicopter bit. Like, that is in and of itself a brilliant bit. It's not just the words, it's how he brings his body into the bit. And the reason why I talk about that is because we learned from y'all. We learned how to do this. And the fact that you are doing this festival, the fact that this is something that so many, the fact that so many comics even did like Judy Carter's book and learned through that. It's a system, it's a spoken word sport. And it's like each generation of comics builds on it. So we're watching generations of comics really fumble right now. And I know right now they're gonna come home with a lot of zeros in their account, but it just sucks. And it's really hard to articulate this. I might have a 5th video on this because it's that big of a deal. It is that big of a deal. And it's just like, okay, all of the hours of learning from these comedians, now we have to sit with as comics who learn from these comedians and go, did it really matter? did it really matter? Because now look at what they're doing. And what is the purity in comedy anymore if these are what the top comedians are resorting to? So I can't stop thinking about this. I can't stop thinking about the parallels to like World War II and how entertainers were literally utilized in Germany for these specific purposes. It's a really hard moral compass to sit with and think about from a perspective of history and from a perspective of what a comic is here to do. And I don't know, I just have so many thoughts. And I think a lot of comedians, and I'm specifically thinking about comedians, how a lot of comedians probably are like, do you even go? I know these comics are gonna sell out their tours and everything, but it's frustrating. And a lot of comics really care, you know? Like, you learn how to write a joke, you listen to the rapport that other comedians had. I talked about Opie and Anthony before and how they would literally bring comics aboard. This was pre-Rogan, and they would all sit there and joke, and you would hear, the banter between them. But the thing about that is most of those comedians now are on Riyadh. So it's very interesting to see that. And I've talked about the Donald Rumsfeld bit prior to this because it is an important bit, because it's the antithesis of this festival. Donald Rumsfeld bit for Opie and Anthony. So I'm not really articulating this well, but I will put this somewhere on a social media platform. I'm sure a lot of comedians are questioning why we still do this. I'm sure a lot of comedians are questioning, like, what's the next level? Because for comics that are, like, writing and doing shows, like, there's a huge mental processing of, like, what's the point of all this? At the end of the day, what is the point of all of this if that's what our heroes are doing? Just food for thought. Have a great day.